The UFC is without a doubt the biggest MMA promotion in history. It delivers on entertainment, creating stars, and building a global fan base like no other. It's truly becoming a worldwide phenomenon. But despite all that success, I've got a few things to call out. Now, don't get me wrong, the UFC has been hugely successful, but there are still plenty of things that are holding the promotion back from being even bigger than it already is. And no, I'm not talking about the fighter pay. That's a whole other video for another day. Today we're diving into the issues that are stopping the UFC from reaching its full potential. Now let's get into it. Now, one of the most glaring issues with the UFC today is the declining quality of fight cards, especially since their deal with ESPN kicked in back in 2019. I mean, remember the days before the ESPN deal? It felt like a completely different sport. Back then, every fight night card were like stacked to the brims with some big names and high-level matchups. Now, take 2018 for an example. We had Eddie Alvarez versus Dustin Poirier 2 headline a fight night card. That wasn't even a pay-per-view event. Let that sink in for a bit, okay? Now, the co-main event was Jose Aldo versus Jeremy Stephens. And if that wasn't enough, you also had fighters like Joanna Jędrzejczyk and Alexander Hernandez on the same card. Compare that to today, and it's like we're watching a total different sport. Now, let's look at another card from that year. Kevin Lee versus Al Iaquinta 2. It had Lee versus Iaquinta as the main event, Dan Hooker versus Edson Barboza as the co-main event, Rob Font versus Sergio Pettis as the feature fight, and Jim Miller versus Charles Oliveira as the other feature fight in that same main card. Stacked, am I right? Oh, and let's not forget about the Francis Ngannou versus Curtis Blaydes 2 fight, which was another fight night headliner with Alistair Overeem versus Sergey Pavlovich, and we had Song Yadong and Li Jinliang in the same card. Those were the fight night cards. Now let's flash forward to today. Let's be honest, the majority of the fight night cards are straight up trash, and even some of the pay-per-views feel a little bit like a letdown. It's rare that we get a good fight night card unless it's in places like Saudi Arabia or Abu Dhabi, where they seem to put a little bit more effort. Once in a while, we'll get a solid main event like Gilbert Burns versus Sean Brady or Barboza versus Murphy, but then you have other cards where the main event makes you wonder why you're even watching. I mean, Lemos versus Generobi, Tybura versus Spivak 2, come on, no one is rushing home to catch that. The inconsistency is what is killing it. One week we might get lucky with a stacked card, but the next it might be a main event that barely feels like it should be headlining a regional promotion. It's frustrating because as fans we know what the UFC is capable of delivering. We've seen great fight night cards in the past, so when they toss out a lackluster lineup, it's hard not to feel like they're just phoning it in. And it's not just the fight night cards either. Even some pay-per-views are suffering from the same lack of quality. I mean, we're paying top dollar for these events, and sometimes they don't even live up to the hype of the free events from a few years ago. The UFC is charging us premium price for this, which is watered down product. We used to look forward to UFC weekends, but now half the time we're debating whether it's even worth tuning in. The UFC needs to step it up because right now it feels like they're coasting on their names and the fans deserve better. And look, I get it, they're obligated to crank out 42 events a year because of the ESPN deal, and of course they're trying to make their money, but honestly the cards nowadays just feel watered down. Back in the day, almost every fight had recognizable names or exciting prospects. Now it feels like the UFC is just relying on one or two big events or big matchups to carry the entire event, while the rest of the card is just filler. Where's the excitement? Where's the star power? It's like we're paying more and getting less, and that brings me to my next point. Now let's talk about the cost of being a UFC fan today. Remember when pay-per-views used to cost $59.99? Those were the good old days. Now in 2024, it's up to $79.99 for a single event. Combine that with the subscription fee for an ESPN Plus, and we're talking about over $1,000 a year just to watch all the UFC events. $1,059.87 to be exact. That's just not me throwing a number around. I did the math, and look man, the price hike combined with the weaker fight cards is why so many people have turned to illegal streaming. And can you really blame them? I mean, who can afford to drop that kind of cash on every UFC event? It's like if the UFC keeps going down this road, fans are going to need to take out a second mortgage just to watch a full year of UFC pay-per-views. And look, man, another complaint I have about the company is about their press conference. You see, back in the day, you'll get a solid 30-minute press conference with some back and forth banter. Fighters would be trash talking and Dana would be trying to get things in control. Nowadays, the pressers are short, filled with repetitive questions, and they end before things start to get interesting. It's like they're more worried about keeping their appearance than giving the fans drama that they crave. Nowadays, we get these press conferences feeling mostly all the same with their NPC dialogue loops, same questions, same answers, same bored expressions. Back then, even if you weren't hyped for a fight, a good press conference can give you amped up. Now, you might as well tune out because you're not missing anything. Now, don't get me wrong, we'll probably get some gems every so often, but most of the time, it sucks. And speaking of press conference, can we talk about the media? What the hell happened to the questions? And look, I get it. They don't want to upset Dana or something. It's too risky, but come on. How many times have we heard, what would a win tonight do for your career? Like, really, man? That's the best you got? Or questions like, hey, Dana, when are you coming back to Texas? Who cares about that right now? Ask something juicy, man. I kind of miss the days of Ariel Helwani, to be honest. Sure, not everyone likes him, and he can stir the pot sometimes, but that's kind of fun. He wasn't afraid to ask the tough questions too, or start a little drama between the fighters. And honestly, that's what helps the company. That's what sells fights. Drama. But now the UFC is all corporate with their ESPN deal. They've toned everything down. It's all about keeping things clean and making their money. That's the thing though, the UFC has become too corporate. It used to feel raw, like it was a sport for the people, by the people. Now it feels like a giant machine pumping out content to meet ESPN's quotas. And yeah, they're making a ton of money, I get that, but it's an expense of the product. Fans don't care about the ESPN deal, bottom line. They care about good fights, drama, star power. But as long as Dana and the UFC's brass are getting paid, it seems like they're going to be happy where things are at. At the end of the day, we still love the UFC. That's why we're still here, watching, complaining, and streaming when we can't afford those UFC pay-per-view prices. But man, it's frustrating to see how the sport has changed. If the UFC doesn't get it together soon, they might start losing some fans. And damn, that's a shame. The sport had so much potential to be even bigger than it is right now. But the way the things are going, it feels like we're getting further and further away from the glory days. But what do you guys think about the current state of the UFC? Are you guys actually enjoying how things are now? And if so, let me know why. I would be curious to hear your thoughts. And if you're in the same page as me and you don't like where things are heading, drop a comment. I'll also love to hear your reasons too. Anyways, that's pretty much it for this video, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you guys did, don't forget to leave a like, and if you're new here, make sure you subscribe to the channel. And as always, guys, I'll see you guys on my next one.